This is the comma. It doesn't look so terrible when seen this way, but it does trouble many writers. That is why we'll be covering the essential uses of the comma in this lesson, so that you can use the comma correctly in nearly all instances. Well, the comma might be seen this way, perhaps a little bit ridiculous, but it is known for terrorizing writers, or at least annoying them. No matter what, a lot of people's lives have probably been made miserable by the comma. And it's understandable because commas can be very confusing. Some people tell you to put commas where you pause. Others don't put any at all and they just hope for the best. However, I'm here to tell you that there are just 4 rules to know how to use most commas. And once you know those rules, you will be in control of the comma. So feel the hope. The comma doesn't have to be terrible and terrifying. It can actually be used to help clarify where your clauses and phrases are. It can be used to show where necessary and unnecessary content is. The rules of comma use strengthen your writing. It allows you to communicate much more clearly and effectively to your reader. So let's begin. The 4 functions of the comma include separating items in a list, linking complete sentences, introducing content that begins a sentence, and setting off content not necessary to a sentence. The first function of the comma is known as a lister. When you have 3 or more items in a list, place commas between them. In the first example, Bobby has to eat broccoli, liver, and peas before his cake. Since Bobby has to eat 3 items, commas are placed after each item. Sometimes the comma before the "and" is not included. Whether it is or is not is often optional. Personally, I prefer to use it to clarify how the items in the list relate to each other. Now, in the second example, if Bobby only had to eat broccoli and peas, then there are only 2 items and no commas are needed. Bobby might have a better chance at getting to his cake if he only had to eat the 2. However, poor Bobby has to eat all 3. Well, let's hope that cake is delicious, because after eating all that food, you deserve a cake. Now, before we get to the comma as a linker, introducer, or inserter, we have to be reminded of what a subject, verb, clause, phrase, incomplete, and complete idea are. I include this page in case you haven't seen the previous lesson or perhaps need a reminder. If you have seen it, then you can pause it now and read through this page as a brief refresher. If you haven't seen it, you can still move on after reading this, but I do recommend viewing the full lesson beforehand. Either way, we're going to be moving on to the comma as a linker since this lesson is all about the comma. The comma as a linker happens in a specific instance. First of all, it has to be between 2 complete sentences that are also known as independent clauses. Second of all, it has to be after a coordinating conjunction. The coordinating conjunctions include the following words: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. This comma will help to combine the 2 complete sentences together. Now notice this list does not include the words however or also. Even though students sometimes use those words as coordinating conjunctions, and it sounds like it should be a coordinating conjunction, they actually are not. So, be sure that whenever you're doing this, joining the 2 sentences with a coordinating conjunction, that you actually have the real coordinating conjunction word. Alright, so in this example, little Bobby is the subject and dashed is the verb. This is one complete sentence. The second part has parents as the subject and stopped as the verb. Both sentences are also complete ideas. Since that is the case, they are both complete sentences. So the comma in green is placed before the coordinating conjunction, which is but, shown in blue. Now if we had the sentence that Bobby needed to eat broccoli and peas before his cake, no comma is needed. There is a complete sentence before the coordinating conjunction and, however, there is no complete sentence in the part after. Therefore, we do not need a comma. The coordinating conjunction stands by itself. Bobby also seems to be standing by himself against his parents since he wants to get his cake before the vegetables. But who can blame him? Comma can also be used to introduce content at the beginning of a sentence. This includes words such as yes, or a person's name like Bobby, It can include a phrase, such as after the conference, or it can include a clause, such as unless it starts snowing. The content at the beginning of the sentence must be dependent, meaning it is not a complete idea. If it is not dependent, you can't put a comma after it. So often we can identify the dependent phrases and clauses if a subordinated conjunction starts it. So the phrase, for the next 4 hours, is not a complete idea because we do not know what the subject or verb is, and because the subordinate conjunction for starts it. It's not only an incomplete idea, but a bad idea for Bobby, because he's only going to want that cake more and more as time passes. Finally, keep in mind that the dependent content must happen at the beginning of the sentence for the comma to be placed after it. Look at the last example. The dependent content is during the meeting. Since it is at the end of the sentence, no comma is needed. Now, if it was placed before the subject I, then the comma would need to happen after meeting. When the comma functions as an inserter, commas are placed on both sides of the content not necessary to the meaning of a sentence. In the first example, the sentence reads, "The cake that Bobby's mom baked was moist, soft, and warm." We recognize the verbs as baked and was. However, the subject is cake, since that is what the sentence is all about. So we ask, what does the cake take? The cake takes the verb was, since it describes how the cake exists as soft, moist, and warm. Feeling hungry yet? We can bet that Bobby is. So we have identified what the cake is, but does the section that Bobby's mom baked need to be in the sentence? Is it necessary? The answer is yes. The information gives necessary meaning because we know where the cake comes from, and without that information, we wouldn't know as much. Let's look at the second example. It says, Bobby, with swollen eyes full of tears, cried when his mother put the cake away. It seems like Bobby's having a really bad day. However, the section with swollen eyes full of tears is not necessary to the sentence. We already know that Bobby is crying, so we don't need to know that extra meaning. Therefore, we put commas before and after that content. So, now you know how to use commas in almost all situations. We've had to eat the peas, broccoli, and liver of comma rules, but now you can savor the delicious cake of correctly using commas. And that is a cake worth celebrating.